podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you listening, this is our first ever live show. You may be listening live. You may also be listening to this back after. But regardless of that, welcome and thank you for tuning in. Tonight, we are doing a bit of a special episode, something a little bit different. We are going to be talking about the fact that Gareth Southgate has today resigned from the England job. And in order to do that, I needed people that know a lot more about football than I do. So I've decided to ignore those and bring on Ben and Joe instead. So Ben and Joe are joining us from our friends over at That Millwall podcast. You would have seen them from their shows as well. So just a quick introduction and hello. First of all, Ben, how you doing, mate? Good to see you.
Evening, fellas. How are we doing? Thanks for inviting us on, Chris. Looking forward to this one. Looking forward to discussing the topic of Southgate leaving. Let's put it that way.
Yes, mate. Absolutely. Sound a bit different to Millwall, right? But yeah, a good topic nonetheless. And good evening, our friend, Mr. Zampa. Joe, how you doing, mate?
Hi, Chris. Hi, Ben. How you doing, lads? Yeah, be good to have a little discussion on the Southgate situation. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a sprinkle of Millwall on top there. I'm pretty sure of it. But yeah, it'd be a good topic for conversation, certainly.
Definitely. And we know, like, there was a lot of Millwall fans over there, weren't there? You know, the amount of flags and people that you saw. So I know that as Millwall fans, we're a very passionate bunch and we've got a real vested interest in what is the top job in English football, right? You know, and Gareth Southgate's been with us now for a long, long time. And it is definitely a big change. So, and just put in we've got some people in the chat already saying hello. So just we'll go to some of those messages. So evening, Carl. Hope you're doing well, mate. And we have our dear friend Stephen. You've got the second, third, and fourth best looking Millwall podcasters out there. I don't know who he could possibly be talking about. Who is number one? But there you go. So. Look, what we're going to do for this show is we're going to go into a few different sort of topics within Southgate, but I'm going to kick things off with just sharing a few stats because I just want to go straight into the deep end and I'm going to show a few stats. I just want to get your opinion. And ultimately, I think what this does is tell you where my head's at. So first of all, first stat is this is Gareth Southgate's record. Okay. So he managed 102 games for England. 64 wins during that period with a win percentage ratio of 62.7%. He actually, I've got another chart in a moment, but he's actually the second highest points per game ever for an England manager. Okay. However, in terms of could we deem him to be a successful manager, I think sometimes the key lies in this stat, which is Southgate's record against FIFA ranked top 10 teams. So he played 26 games and he won 8 games out of that. And his win percentage was only 30%. And for me, a reason I wanted to put these bad boys up straight away is because this is, for me, what highlights whether we can determine his overall reign as a success or not. And that is the fact that we'll definitely get into that he's left it much better than when he took over. But when it comes down to it, we did struggle to win those big games. So that's kind of like an initial reaction. But Ben, I'll come to you first. Like, what was your kind of initial reaction when you first heard that Southgate was resigning?
It definitely wasn't one of shock. I think just listening to his post-match interviews, there were certain phrases that he used. Like he said, England have good youngsters. I picked up on that. And I thought if he was staying, he would say we. So there were certain elements of what he'd said after the game. And I know emotions were obviously running high, but yeah, certainly wasn't one of shock. I think, like everyone, I think looking back on his reign, and as you said there, Chris, it's a genuine split, I feel. And I wanted to kind of take a look at his whole tenure as not just football related, but yeah, not one of shock. I also felt like it was the right time. It just felt like it come to a natural end now. I think in football, you just need a fresh voice sometimes. There was obviously reports coming out, obviously Bellingham in game having a bit of an argument with him. I'm sure over the next few days and maybe weeks, we're going to now find out that there weren't things right in the camp. So yeah, I just felt like it definitely just come to a natural end. So not one of shock, but the right time.
Agreed. Agree. Joe, do you feel the same?
Yeah, a bit similar to Ben, really. Not surprised at all. And then, of course, it's always the way, isn't it? Like, as much as the majority of the country probably wanted Southgate to resign, let's be honest, I would imagine 80% of the country wanted that to happen. When it happens, you almost sort of feel like, oh, you kind of obviously so feel sorry for him. You kind of think, oh, was he that bad? Is it? It's like dumping a girlfriend, isn't it? Who you don't want to know. Suddenly, as soon as like she leaves you, like fucking hell, hang on a minute, like maybe we can make it up. Can we patch things up again? So yeah, is that sort of sour sort of taste thing? Like, oh right, okay, is it the right move? Yeah, you look about how successful he's been, and I've seen those stats before, Chris. The first stat you showed in regards to his win percentage, but I wasn't aware of the second stat in that he seems to struggle a lot against top teams, and that doesn't surprise me because Southgate, he has been a little bit of a tactician. He likes to think he is a tactician because he always tries to sort of change the formations from back 3 to 4 to 5 or whatever. But what I noticed with Southgate, maybe it's because he was a defender by trade when he was a player, is that he's always got that defensive mindset. And what I hate about him is that when he plays against good teams, suddenly he's more worried about them than playing to our strengths and letting them worry about us. That makes any sense. Yeah, you take someone like Terry Venables in '96. He just did not give a shit. Yeah, he played to his strengths. He played attacking football. And you see what we did to Holland, I think we should really use that to our advantage. A bit like what Spain did, really, to the extent that they played to their strengths. They played attacking football. It suited their style, and it's no surprise that they end up winning, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think, look, I'd echo what both of you boys say in terms of, for me, it wasn't a surprise. I think sometimes in life, you just come to a natural cycle end and things need to just change. And I think even if he'd have won, by the way, I think I'd have said the same thing. Yeah. Sometimes it just comes to his natural end. But I think when we're trying to assess, I guess, that his success of the England tenure, I think you also need to be really mindful of the job he walked into. Because the job he walked into, and I'm going to just flick something else up on screen now. So what this does is just looks at essentially our success in major tournaments before Southgate and after, obviously, with Southgate. If you look at where we'd got to in the last sort of 4 tournaments before Southgate came in, doesn't really make for very pretty reading. And you could argue that was with some potentially even more talented groups of players than Southgate's had at his disposal. So I'm trying to give a balanced view here because I think ultimately I started off by saying the fact that he hadn't, he wasn't able to beat big teams, but he was able to get us further in competitions than others would. I just noticed a spelling mistake on that. It tells you when you're trying to rush to get these things together. But what was your initial reaction in terms of assessing his tenure? Joe, I'll come to you first.
I mean, firstly, as you mentioned there on that stat there, which is a great slide to look at, is where we were to where we've come to, and he is, without a shadow of a doubt, he's transformed the England team. He's transformed the way that we're looked upon throughout the world as a footballing nation. I think he's got the media and the fans on board, which is something that I think they sort of struggled a bit prior to Southgate. I mean, they had a bit of criticism recently, but I think a lot of that was, due to the performances of the last sort of few games and stuff. But ultimately, there's been a real togetherness, I think, between the fans and the players, which were lacking previously. And also, I mean, I listened to Rio Ferdinand on a podcast with Gary Lineker and Shearer recently, and he talked about being a player and how he felt it was a real divide amongst all the players. And I think everyone knows this, the story I'm going to mention here about how when they sort of turn up there for lunches or dinners and togetherness, you'll get a table of like Liverpool players on one table, Man United players on another table, and then, Chelsea there, and there's no cohesion between them. They weren't sort of getting on with each other. There's a real divide. And that can't help at all when you're going out there supposed to be playing as a team in a tournament. Whereas Southgate done amazingly by knocking those barriers down. And he did bring that togetherness amongst the players and the squad. And you see that. You can see there's a real togetherness. You can see that they get on really well, they play really well together, and they're kind of really bonded really, really well. So, answer to your question, Chris, he's done an amazing job. He really has. We think about where we were, where we come from to where we are now. But I think, it's come to an end now where I think the change is good. I think he's had the job for a quite a long tenure now. He's got close, hasn't quite done it. And I think now he needs to pass on that mantle to someone else who could take us to the next level.
Joe, agree. And I think, Ben, what I'd love to get from your perspective as well is, a lot of people say 2 finals, didn't win them, therefore can't be deemed a success. But when you look back on before Southgate and our performances in major tournaments, is he almost a victim of his own success in the sense that expectations have risen because we have started to perform better at major tournaments? I'd love to get your point of view on that.
Yeah, 100%. And if we start on that, I said to you guys earlier, and Joe, I know you laughed, but he's made the impossible job even more impossible now, because genuinely the next manager that comes in, the only way in which he is now deemed a success, whoever that is going to be, is by winning something, because he's put us in that position now. Like we were all disappointed by reaching finals, or God forbid we get knocked out in the semi-final now. He's risen that bar, he's risen that expectation because of how well we've performed. And I think, just to touch upon something else you mentioned there, Chris, and I was very hard and I was very critical of Southgate for a lot of his tenure. I felt like, again, going back to your stat, we lost a lot of the important games and we lost against a lot of the big sides. It's great beating San Marino 6-0, fantastic. But ultimately, we have lost the important matches. My view on his tenure has softened. I think just with a bit of reflection and looking back on his time as a whole, it's definitely softened, as I say. And I think he should get a tremendous amount of credit for picking English football up from where it was and where he's left it. And as we say, the next person that picks it up now has got, I don't know how they really improve, because even if we go in, this person goes in, puts in a bit of a philosophy, changes our play style, we get knocked out in the quarterfinals. How's the country going to react then? So yeah, he's made the job for the next person a really difficult one. I really hope people look back on Southgate's time and say thanks for everything you did. But as I said at the beginning, I do just feel now it is, like Joe said, that time for some fresh ideas, a new face. A big criticism that I did have of Southgate, and I still feel this way, is I just don't think he was tactically a top manager. And again, just a few comments that he made about the squad being tired and not having fit players, just things like that. And I feel like he's the person who picks that team, right? He could have fully rotated like Spain did in game 3. So who's that really to blame? And I get his point of players playing a lot of games. I do get that. But ultimately, he's the manager. And we look at other stats like Cole Palmer playing 17 minutes of regulation football, Anthony Gordon playing 4, just doesn't add up to me, especially when the team's struggling. Like,
not taking Grealish.
Yeah, things like that. And you could argue that I think the squad we took was probably the right one looking back now, but Grealish was certainly added something a little bit different in there. So a long-winded answer to your question, mate. But look, I hope we look back on his tenure with pride, say thank you, and just say, yeah, who's next? Who can ultimately get us over the line in the important games?
Yeah, and I think, look, it's easy to go. I think, and you could see it in the chat, by the way, it's so divided, I think, on the opinion of Southgate. And for me, and I'm not just sitting on the fence for the sake of it, I think my view is right down the middle, which is that ultimately he hasn't won anything. So to call it a successful reign is difficult. But when you look at probably the objectives that were set out for him when he took the job, some of those things that maybe are not necessarily results driven, but would get to results driven, I think he's done them. To Joe's point, he has brought, in my opinion, the country together. He's shown certain players a pathway to the team. There's certainly, what it appears on the eye, a much bigger camaraderie around the group. So there's a lot of things that he has done that I think need to be commended in terms of some of the objectives that I'm sure was put in place. But now
to that point, Chris, sorry to jump in, I don't think it doesn't need to be black and white, right? It doesn't need to be
Exactly.
yes or no in this instance. Do you think he was a success? Do you think he's a failure? I think there's so many objectives, like you said, that he would have had when he first picked up the job. That yes, ultimately, football is a success sport, right? And you're judged on has he won trophies. But if someone had offered us the stats you've shown, the progression of us getting to the late stage of tournaments after we got knocked out against Iceland, we all would have gone, "You're on drugs. There's no chance that's happening."
That was the lowest, and that was the lowest of the low, weren't it? I mean, if you think back to that Iceland game, and we went through a period there where we just looked so flat. I don't think players even wanted to play for England. It's just a real sort of like low sort of energy,
which is shocking, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. That's exactly how it was. So, to the job that he's done, you could argue it has been a success because he's really sort of picked up that England squad. He's done really well with the youth system. He's not afraid to try young players and give them their first caps and bring them through. And he's done lots of positive stuff. The only thing he hasn't done is that that final bit of actually winning a tournament. Whether it be a Euro or a World Cup. But again, 2 finals and a semi-final. His last 3 tournaments, 4 tournaments rather. You can't deny that it's been a success. In his tenure. And I think it's just a perfect time. I see it as a positive rather than a negative. It's a perfect time to pass it on to another manager that can take us to the next level. And I tell you what, if we do win the World Cup in 2026, a lot of that thanks will have to come down to Southgate for the good work that he started.
And do you know what? That draws parallels to a Millwall side that we have both, all 3 of us have been part of the era, which was, if you remember, the Mark McGee era. A lot of the legwork was put in by Keith Stevens and Alan McCleary that never, I say it didn't get recognised. It has done in time. But I think that's another example of where some of that stuff that happens in the background can then lend itself to take us forwards. And I think the one thing I will say is, and this is drawing on this particular comment here from GC, the football, it's really weird because, again, I'm torn because when I look back at it, Gareth Southgate has probably given me some of my most favourite memories supporting England. Like, fact. And I challenge anyone in the chat to disagree with that. Obviously, of a certain age, right? But yet, at the same time, the football at times was dire. So it's how do you draw on that, Ben? Like, what's your view on? It's almost a bit like parallel. The football is completely different styles, but it's a bit of a parallel with Gary Rowett in the sense that the football on the eye was dire, but does it matter if there's success?
Yeah, I think the similarities are definitely there. I think my mind was changed actually this afternoon listening to someone that I don't normally agree with, and that was Danny Mills. And he sat there and went,
I thought you were saying me for a second there.
I normally agree with you, mate. And Danny Mills said, look, the thing with Southgate was that he meticulously studied international football and past teams that had won competitions and how they would win it and how they would play in a pragmatic way, and that you would nearly always have to go through an extra time or a penalty shootout to win it. And he also said that was, in a way, his downfall because he would not move outside of that approach because he was so adamant on that's how you would win a tournament. I think the difference is, and again, I was very, very critical of the football that we played and felt like the shackles just weren't being released to the players. But it's 7 games of football, I'd say, ultimately. And you look at Portugal's when they won the Euros, right? If you go 7 games unbeaten, you're probably going to near enough win the competition. Sounds a stupid thing to say because if you get beaten knockout football, you're out, right? But it's easy to say, yeah, we'll go all out attack. But if we would have, and again, something that I disagreed with, but then listened to Southgate's post-match interview, he said, if we'd have gone 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, their wingers would have torn us apart because of X, Y, and Z. And whilst I go back to Joe's point of saying, yes, that makes it sound like we're more scared of them, sometimes you just can't go like for like, right? Because the way that Yamal was playing and Williams was playing, he probably would have torn our fullbacks apart. So, yeah,
I don't know. I mean, there's again, it comes to tactics, doesn't it? And what you ask your players to do off the ball and on the ball. I mean, with a 3 at the back, if you're playing Shaw, who's a natural left back anyway, once that transition of plays happen and Spain got the ball, then immediately Shaw's going to fall back into his left back position. You now got a back 4 there, ain't you? And you could argue that Saka will then come back into a 5, but little less urgency. So what I'm saying is, as a 3 or a 5, what you want to call it, it'd probably a 3 with Saka and Shaw up high as wing backs. As long as Shaw ain't push up too high and we can fall back into a 4, and then of course you've got Declan Rice that can sort of fill in as well from the EB. I think there's a way of managing it, but I think what was worrying for me is straight away for that final, although we weren't exactly blowing teams out of the water when he made that change in formation in the last sort of few games, but suddenly it reminded me
better, wasn't it? And it was more free flow.
Yeah, it was. But going back to a 4 again, suddenly we went back to the old sort of system that wasn't working for the first couple of games in the qualies. And straight away you're on the back foot. You know what's to come.
Yeah.
You know we're not going to have much possession because that's what happened in the first couple of games. And even psychologically, the players were thinking, hang a minute, it didn't work very well this time, this formation. It worked better with a back 3. So again, that's just Southgate being a little bit too sort of conservative and too scared and being a little bit sort of worried about the opposition. I think when you're in a final and you got there and you play your best football with a back 3, and playing the system he played, you got to take it to them and play it and take some risks. Look at Spain; they took fucking risks. I mean, their left back, the long-haired Conacello, what his name is. Yeah, I mean, he's fucking useless at Chelsea. He's been dog shit.
Yeah,
and they played him at left back. Yeah, in a back 4, right? So he's gonna be quite, when he pushes up, he's gonna be quite, isolated on the transition, and he's playing against the likes of Saka, Cole Palmer, 2 of the greatest players in the Premiership at the moment, even on form. But did Spain worry about it? Did they say, well, actually, you know what? We're playing against England with Saka, and we've got Foden and Bellingham. I'll tell you what, we better play with back 5 now, and be a bit cautious. No, they didn't. They played their football. They played to their strengths, and that's where Southgate went wrong. I think he just went too conservative.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit that Danny Mills was saying in terms of that's his downfall, right? He meticulously studied how we were going to win these tournaments and wouldn't move away from it. But what I would like to see in the next manager is having the balls of saying we're going to beat you rather than how many times do we say that as a Gary Rowett manager, right?
Exactly that.
We're going to beat you rather than we're not going to
worry about you.
Yeah. So I mean that would be my criticism of the play style, and I think by moving away from Gareth, I think that's one thing that the FA really needs to look at.
Agree, chaps, and I think for me, there's one question I'll ask both of you and also people in the chat, and there's a lot of negativity in the chat, and I think a lot of it is justified, particularly around the playing style. But one question I ask you all is, has he left the job in a better place, significantly better place than when he took it? And for me, the answer is a resounding yes.
An unarguable yes for me. I don't think you can argue that. 100% yes.
Yeah, he has for sure. But then has he also sort of, what's the word, sort of drained the kind of confidence of these players? Because him asking them to be quite conservative, you're asking players like Foden and Bellingham to play in roles that they're not used to playing. Their success in the last sort of year or two has been played, in an attacking, creative way. And he's asked them to sort of defend and do things that they're not really, okay, they can do it, but it's not their choice. And that, for me, is a shame. It's a crying shame, because I would rather them play to their strengths, play with confidence and play with creativity. So the next manager that comes in, although you like to think, yes, the England team is in a much better position than when Southgate found it, he's going to have a big job on his hands to now try to build that confidence in the players and get them to express themselves and play to their strengths and almost play how they play at club football, but take it to the international stage. And I don't get all this bollocks about, it's club football, international football, it's 2 different things. It's fucking football at the end of the day. You play football, you play to your strength. It doesn't matter whether it's international football or club football. The only similarities or difference it will be is that it's a tournament. It's knockout competition most of the time, rather than playing a whole league where you could afford to lose a few games along the way,
Yeah, and there's just a comment here from True Blue. Ben, you want to comment on?
Yeah, more just look. I'm urging fans to be a little bit more understanding, right? And again, it goes back to look at the tenure as a whole of Southgate, and it's easy just to say yeah, we want to play more expansive football. Yeah, we want to blow teams out of the water. But if we do that, the next manager that comes in and does that, let's just, for example, say it's Graham Potter and we go all front foot football. We get knocked out in the group stages. We lose 2-1, 2-1, 2-1 because we battered teams off the park and they've caught us, score from 2 corners, whatever. How do we react as fans to that? There does need to be some element of looking at Southgate as you said there, Chris. He's moved us from a very, very bad position into a very, very good position in terms of, as I've already said, the next manager is really only going to be deemed a success is if we win something. So that's a great place to be in. Us as fans now,
expectations set by Southgate now.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And us as fans now will be disappointed if we get to a semi-final and get knocked out because we'll think, oh, we've been to finals now. So if you look at it as a whole, and again, I was the most avid, we're never going to win a tournament with Southgate in charge. Sort of gave him stick for his play style, that sort of thing. But I do think we just need to step back and go, he's done a good job. He's done a good job.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job, but he can't be deemed to have done a great job because ultimately he did have a very talented bunch of players that he wasn't able to get to win a final.
Here's something, Chris. What would you, or for you, both of you fellas, what would you give Southgate out of 10?
Oh.
What, in the tournament or for
just tenure? His tenure.
I think you've got to give him a high mark. I would say probably an 8. I mean, 2 finals, semi-final and a quarter-final. Why wouldn't you?
Let's just flip this screen up again and ignore the spelling mistake. But, like, you've got to understand as well, no one wanted that job.
No.
That's why Southgate got it.
It was a poison chalice, wasn't it, at the time?
No one wanted it. What did we have? We had Sam Allardyce. We had,
Steve McLaren. We had
McLaren. Like, Roy Hodgson. Like, no one wanted that job. And I think now, I could be wrong, but I think the job becomes a little bit more desirable with what...
It's attractive again.
Oh,
it's
100%.
An attractive job again. And,
especially with the group of players we've got, Chris, as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I think we also need to just bear in mind is, and this is the point I wanted to come, which again, this is why this is not, to your point, Ben, this is not black and white, because it can't be. Because I also agree with this statement from GC, which is actually national teams were a lot stronger. Our competition was a lot stronger before Southgate. You look at the Brazilian team that had like Ronaldinho in, you had Zidane. These players don't exist anymore. I'm sorry, I'll argue with anyone.
True, you're right.
The quality of players that were around, and maybe this is just sentiment because we're all getting old, but I firmly believe that the competition has decreased. Yeah. And I also believe that that's representative of our team. I think that the squad, you look at the era where our midfield was Scholes, Gerrard, Lampard, Beckham. I as good as the players we have now, I think that were better. Do you guys agree with that?
We certainly had big stars. You could even look back at the players like Rooney. We had Michael Owen, Rio Ferdinand. We had some quality players. Hence the reason why they're called the golden generation, weren't they? But again, a lot of that problem we had back then stemmed down to the divide across the team. So I think someone mentioned one of the comments there earlier. Man management wise, I think Southgate was spot on. But as an England coach and getting the best out of our players and giving them the confidence to express themselves, unfortunately, he was so far the other way. It did starve us of our creativity. And like I said it before, I'll say it again. That was the downside. I mean, even the way we got to the final, in those 90 minutes, we couldn't beat Slovenia, we couldn't beat Slovakia, Switzerland, Denmark. We had to go to extra time, or penalties, things like that. Why?
Joe, sorry to jump in there, but we were basically out other than a moment of sheer brilliance by Jude Bellingham.
Yeah, exactly that too. That's right. So that says it all, doesn't it? So yes, we got to the final, and statistically, it does look great, and it looks great on the stats. And when you pulled your one up there, Chris, it shows that Southgate's done really well. But we were so fucking lucky to get to the final in the first place. And we were playing probably to 65%, 70% of our capabilities, really. Had a better manager been in charge, played a system that would get the best out of our players and take it to other teams and play expansive attacking football, then I think we could have won this tournament. And go back to your point there, that the level and the caliber of the other teams around us, we're by far the better team. I think on paper, I think we should have smashed them. Look at the Spain team. I mean, they've got a fucking 16-year-old kid. Do you know what I mean? He's probably not even hit puberty yet. Do you know what I mean? Like,
he's quite good, though, Joe.
He's good. I heard he's all right. Yeah. We've got him on one side. We've got Nico Williams on the other side, who against quality. I remember watching him for Bilbao a couple of years ago, and I picked up on him. I thought he was a really good player. But apart from that, I mean, okay, they've got some good young players, but they're just a good, young, inexperienced team, really, aren't they? They've got no... I'm not saying they've got no right to win the competition as they've done, but they've won every single game in the tournament. Why? Because they played attacking football, they played with confidence, and they took it to teams.
And they play as a team.
And they play as a team.
I want to plug Benjamin Bloom as well, because he's done David's pointed this out here. He did he's done 2 really good videos on England. One which was how we beat Spain, which obviously we didn't end up doing, but that was really interesting because he drew parallels between Spain basically playing like a club team, in the sense that they're all, you could tell they understand how to play with, together. The movement was good, whereas we look like an international team that's kind of thrown together. He's also done a really good breakdown today, so I'd encourage you to watch it on his take on it. And I think, it's very similar to what we're saying here, in the sense that it doesn't have to be black and white, and that actually the true opinion, somewhere down the middle. There's times where I've probably called Southgate every name under the sun, but actually on reflection, has his job been that bad? And David, just to mention your point there around, you could see him coming on Chat with Chaps this season. Watch this space. So I'm going to segue us now to, in terms of, well, what's next? We talked about the reaction, essentially review of his tenure and how Southgate should be remembered, which I think we're all saying, well, the 3 of us certainly are, that he has moved us on. But, what is now next for England? What do we want to see? Do we even have a name at the moment between the 3 of us that we would all be calling for? Ben, I'll come to you, mate. What's your first initial view on that?
Well, there's probably 2 very clear distinctions here, which definitely is black and white. And you touched upon it earlier, Chris. It's going to be, who do I want to get and who do I think we'll get? And they're very, very different answers.
Definitely, yeah.
And look, and again, just go back to touch upon your point that you said earlier, mate, with Southgate now leaving it in a more attractive position. Yeah, it is, because as we say, we're set up, we're ready to win, right, in terms of the squad that we've got. Who do I think will take it? I think we're almost certainly going to go down the interim route, having read the FA statement earlier. They mentioned that they're not afraid to do it. I think that's just going to happen now. I think you could likely see Lee Carsley in that role. They want an FA man. They've obviously spent a lot of money in what's the training centre called? I've had a complete mind blank.
St George. Is it
St George Park. Sorry, yeah, a complete mind blank there. They've spent a lot of money in producing, or putting their efforts into producing better coaches. So I do think we'll end up seeing Lee Carsley in the interim role. And Carl's hit the name on the head that I would love to see is Poch. There's rumours that he said he wants it. Again, I think I'm undecided on whether I want to go down a foreign manager route. I think, again, the FA will want to keep it English, and I think I do. But in terms of play style, getting the most out of these players, I think Poch would be the man to do that. But I don't think we'll get him. So, long-winded answer there, mate, to say I don't know.
So just to recap, Ben, what you're saying is you think, if it's like a head and heart thing, right, in terms of who we think will get is Lee Carsley, which is another yes man for the FA to use their.
I think in the interim role, certainly we'll get Lee Carsley. I think we'll end up getting Potter. Just because, again, something screams to me like he's turned down all those jobs recently. That's what it seems like to me. So I can see it being Carsley for the interim, Potter getting it permanently, or if they can get Potter signed up sort of quicker than they expect. And then my heart says I'd love to get Poch in.
Okay. Joe, what's your view, mate?
So, again, heart and head, yeah? So, I would love to get Pep in charge. That will never happen in a million years. I mean, you could argue that he's won everything that could be won at Man City. So, where's his next challenge? Maybe he wants to sort of like test himself on the international scene. But one, I don't think we can afford him. because what he's getting paid Man City is probably ridiculous, to be honest with you. And also,
just to come in on that point, Joe, sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
They did say on Sky Sports News today, so obviously Eddie Howe had been mentioned, right? And he's earning double what Southgate was on. So you can only imagine what the figure would be for Pep. If Eddie Howe's on double.
Yeah, I mean, certainly now. I mean, at one time, being an international manager, that was the pinnacle, weren't it? And you'd only get the big bucks. But the way how it's gone with club football over the years, the amount of money's been pumped into it, the managers are now earning like ridiculous amounts of money. It's sort of taken over the international scene. So will that ever happen? I doubt it, unless he wants to take a massive pay cut and go for it, test himself at international level. I can't see it happening. Personally, I would love to see someone like Jurgen Klopp do it. Reason being is the success he had with Liverpool over years, a lot of it is down to fast attacking, counter-attacking football. And you look at the players that he had at Liverpool, you could argue there's lots of English players that can fit that system. Yeah, we have got pacey players. We've got likes of Saka, who is his Salah, for example. Kane, who would play that lone striker role for him, he has done at Liverpool. You look at the talent we've got in midfield. We've got fast defenders that can play a higher line, and play on the front foot a bit more. So that would be great. But I don't know about you. I don't know how I feel having a German manager managing the English national team. That doesn't sort of like bode too well with me. I think the FA would choose a bit of a yes man. They'll probably go for someone who's English. So it could well be a Lee Carsley or a Potter. I for one, if I had to go down that route, I would rather go for like an Eddie Howe or even a Frank Lampard. And people might laugh at me saying, why Frank Lampard? But Frank Lampard is very patriotic. He's got fantastic experience playing at international level with England. He knows what it takes to play in tournaments. He knows the pressures and what it brings. I think he's got a bit of experience, albeit at club football. And I know people will argue, well, it hasn't been that successful. But when you're dealing with a group of players and you're trying to get the best out of these players and you want to play attacking football, he's the answer. I think he can give us all the things that Southgate can't. And let's be honest, it ain't going to be a tough job for him. You're not asking him to take on average, to shit players and try and polish a turd here. You're asking him to take on a really, really decent group of talented players, young players that are very, very good, arguably some of the best players in the world. And all you're trying to do is get in their heads, get in their minds, play attacking football, take it to the world and let them play their football. And I think he's more than capable of doing that. I would love to see him doing it with Joe Edwards as his assistant, of course.
Someone just put that in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah. So my view would be that, again, so the way I look at it is I think we go down one of two routes. I think we go, and it's similar to what you guys are saying. We go English, yes man to a point. And then for me, I would probably go, if we went down that route, I would go with Eddie Howe over Potter. Just to justify my reasoning there is that, to my knowledge, Potter has only done it at Brighton. And then Brighton's success continued after he went, and obviously wasn't particularly successful at Chelsea. Having said that, not many people have been recently. Whereas Eddie Howe has now had success at two clubs. Yes, it didn't work out for him at Burnley, but I think it's fair to say that he's done a fairly good job at Newcastle and obviously the success at Bournemouth. Plus his style of play is quite front foot and attacking. So if we were to go down that route, I would personally go Eddie Howe. I'm not a Lampard fan, just to be completely honest. And clearly Danny isn't either. So the other chap isn't. But,
just tell us what you think, Danny. Don't hold back.
Tell us what you think. And then if we went down the foreign route, I think a couple of other names that I'll just throw in there just because they haven't been mentioned yet. And again, it's opinions. Jose Mourinho, whatever you think of him, he's a winner. Is he too old now? Are his tactics outdated? Would he even want it? I mean, he's had plenty of payoffs, so 4 million should be fine for him.
He has just signed for. Has he gone to Besiktas or Galatasaray?
He has, but I mean,
I'm sure that contract could be bought out, couldn't it? Yeah,
it is what it is. So that's one name, and then the other name, and I think he is Danish or Austrian. An outside name is Thomas Frank.
Okay,
I really like what he's done with Brentford. He's not got bundles of money to spend. I don't really want a manager that's had a huge checkbook, because ultimately you're given the players you've got, right? So that's another name that I think, from my understanding, not that I've got any knowledge, but in the football circles, he's very highly rated and someone else that could potentially come into the mix. So,
what about Tuchel? I mean, he's available.
Yeah, I've seen him banding about a bit.
Yeah, I mean the German argument applies there, doesn't it? I'm not saying I'm against having a German in charge, but I think if you apply that argument to Klopp, you have to apply it to Tuchel.
Yeah.
Just on the wider conversation of the next manager, I think we've got to be realistic and understanding, and Joe, you touched upon it, that unfortunately now international football isn't the pinnacle anymore, and the England job isn't the pinnacle anymore. All top coaches, all top managers want to manage in the Premier League, and they want to manage in the Champions League. And that's unfortunately, we need to be realistic who wants the job as well. And whilst we'd love to have probably Klopp in charge or Mourinho, one, I think financially we're just not going to be able to pay them what they want, and two, I think these coaches like spending day to day building philosophies and play styles with clubs, right? And building something over a long period of time. That's the big challenge for the next England manager as well, is going to be implementing a philosophy that we can move forward with. And I think that's, again, why the FA will look at someone that they will be able to mould, or they already have in the system, because they will say, we want to try and implement it. Similar to what Gareth has done, work with the 21s, they can push it down to the youth level as well. It's something that I think the FA will look at. But yeah, the big thing there is who's going to want the job more than who do we want to have the job.
I mean, the German thing aside, I just think with Klopp, I just think he's so suited to what we're lacking, what we're needing at the moment. Yeah, he's very, very passionate. He'll definitely get a tune out of these boys. He'll get the fans on board. He'll be great with the media. He's available. If he's Liverpool manager who's doing what Liverpool, there's no way he'll probably take the job. So I think circumstance, the way the things are at the moment, I think he could be a very, very good fit for what we're looking for. And I'm pretty sure the FA will be talking to him. Also, he knows all the players. He spent a long time in the Premiership. He's played against many of these players before. He knows their strengths, their weaknesses. I think he'd be a very, very highly sought candidate for the job.
Well, again, just touching on that, I know I said Poch, and there's a couple of people in the chat that said Poch. If you have a look at the betting, he's the same price. Klopp and Poch are the same price.
I just don't see, as good as Poch is, I don't think he has the passion or the charisma to do what we want him to do. Dare I say, he's a little bit like Southgate in that sort of way. I think we've got to move away from that now. We've got to try something different. The most enjoyable time for me as an England fan watching England was under Terry Venables. I love that time. You can almost forgive them for
we're not old enough to remember that.
Oh, come on. Well, I was
because you look like a young John Travolta then.
I was only about 7 at the time, weren't I? So, but no, I could only, for me, like, it was almost forgiven at the time for us not to win it, the competition. There was no like poor hatred towards Venables. The fans loved it because he gave us the football we wanted to play. We had some great memories, great times, And I just think that whoever comes in now has to give us something different to what we've got, what we had with Southgate. We can't go backwards. We need someone who's going to make a real difference. I think someone like a Klopp would be the answer, personally. That's my opinion.
Well, I think to Barry's comment in the chat there, we can all look forward to Lee Carsley getting the job full time.
An Irishman taking over the England job.
God. Well, look, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be very odd to not see the waistcoat or that white polo shirt, these two outfits standing on the sidelines. But I think, look, we draw a sort of a natural conclusion in terms of that, and I think we'll come to you both for sort of final thoughts. But I think we can all agree, regardless of whether your opinion was Southgate did a great job, did an average job, did a shit job, it was time for a change. We now look forward to that change, and it will tell us a lot, I think, about what the FA are thinking as to whether we go down one of those two routes that we discussed. So we'll eagerly await who's going to take us into the 2026 World Cup over in America. Before we close then, gents, so just come to you for a final point, I guess, just any sort of final things you want to say. And also, dare I ask, what is next for Gareth Southgate? Where does he go from here? Do we care? But I mean, it's probably worth just touching on. And Joe, I'll come to you first, mate.
Okay, so Southgate, we'll probably see it pop up in a pizza advert or something again, wouldn't we? It'd be doing something like that, to kind of soften his exit. But no, I wish him well. I'm sure he'll pick up a job somewhere, whether it be an international level, whether it be at club level. I think he mentioned before that he'd love to get back into club management again. So I guess we'll probably see him managing a Premiership team. Just to conclude, I hope that the FA pick the right guy. Obviously, we've got 2026 to look forward to. It's a massive competition in America. One that I think we're good enough to win. We've certainly got a good group of players, young players that are only going to get better. We just need to make sure that we hire the right sort of person. And like I said, we've got to pick someone different to Southgate. We need somebody who's going to really, put us on the front foot and challenge us and put pressure on other teams rather than worry about other teams or what they're doing to us.
Yeah, agree, mate. Agree. Ben, any sort of final thoughts from you, mate?
Similar to Joe's, really, mate. I think it's very much thanks for all the memories, the hard work that you've put in, Gareth. Natural time to move on. Wish him well for the future. I'm sure he will end up in club management. I think one thing we can all agree on is the players have loved playing or being around his squad and him. So I think we will see him in a club role. But yeah, all the best to him. I hope it's looked back on by everyone as a if it's not a successful time, a time we all enjoyed at least and gave us some great memories. So
a positive one, yeah.
Yeah, certainly a positive one. And in terms of management, I just hope the FA are brave for the next appointment and don't go down the yes man route.
Exactly.
My thoughts. But I think we will.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I can't really say any more than what you two boys have said. I agree with everything you've said, and I think we'll just have a quick look at the comments to see if there's anything more. Yes, David, that's a super. I should be saying that. Why am I not? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Definitely. I need to plug this. So,
yes.
If you're watching this, whether it's live or after, we need to get to 1,000 subscribers. And the reason we want to get to
tell us why, Chris.
I will tell you why. Of course, I will. Because I want to buy a new car. No, no, we need to get to.
Tell the real reason why, Chris.
Because you don't make a lot of money from YouTube, but you can't make any money until you have 1,000 subscribers. So we want to make some money for charity this season. It's all going to go to Cancer Research UK. So please, guys, just subscribe to the channel. You don't ever have to watch another video if you don't want to, but please subscribe to the channel, because as soon as we have 1,000 subscribers, we can start, making money. So that is just the ask. Of course, like, shares, all that kind of stuff is appreciated. But the main metric we're trying here is subscribe. So please, please, please do that.
Have you got a charity you're picking, Chris, for this one, or are you still undecided?
It's called Chris's wife's charity. No, I'm kidding.
Expensive handbag collection.
No, it's Cancer Research UK. It's one that I think, unfortunately, many people have been impacted by, myself included. And, we might change from season to season or whatever, but for this season, any profits we do make will be all going to Cancer Research UK.
That's good. I'm sure everyone will agree. That's a good cause, and like you say, it affects everyone. Everyone's had a family member or friend that's been affected by it. So, what a great cause.
No, thank you, chaps, and thank you both for coming on. I know this was very random for us to do this, so thank you both. Hope it's not the last I see of either of you. Really enjoyed that, and hopefully listeners did too. So, let's see where it takes us. Okay, we'll close out there. But actually, before we do, I think David's just put something in the chat that would absolutely like to just address. RIP and condolences to the family of Ted Wilding, who passed away over the last couple of days, who was a Mill historian and involved with the Mill Museum. So great point, David. Thank you for bringing that up. Was something I was going to address in the next Millwall video, but you're absolutely right to do that. So thank you.
God bless Ted.
God bless. Okay, guys, enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to go and have some food before the missus kills me. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Sports Social Podcast Network.